I would like to call to order the joint Troy City Council and Planning Commission special meeting for November 23rd, 2015. If we could have the roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Councilmember Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Pennington?
Here.
Chairman Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Apahidian?
Here.
Mrs. Cruz? Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Trent?
Here.
Mrs. Kupa? Mr. Sanzika?
Here.
Mr. Tago? Ms. Burko?
Okay. Once again, it's nice to be back with the Planning Commission to have a joint meeting. It's always good for us to have a discussion with the Planning Commission. We have 8 discussion items this evening, and we promise that we're going to get this done in an hour. We do have some special guests this evening, and I will turn the table over to City Manager Brian Kishnick, and he will lead us through the discussion items and introduce our special guests that appointed in the meeting. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, Planning Commission. It's great to be back together again for our second session in a row. I guess good things come in twos. I don't know what happened over the weekend, but it seems like there was something on Saturday, last minute heroics, and for the second time, and then on Sunday something happened twice in a row. So I'm glad we're all back here. So having said that, we wanted to, this is a 2-part series, all in one. We wanted to give an update on the master plan together, as we've been talking about it. I know the Planning Commission's done a lot of work, and Ben and Dick Carlisle are here to give a little bit of that update. But what happens is, when we talk about the master plan, especially when the 2 groups get together, there are some recurring themes in development on Big Beaver, and density, and what types of development, and what the bankers will allow and what the bankers won't allow, and what's actually going on in design standards, and should we have very succinct design standards. And I know a few of us, Mayor, you were one, and Chairman Edmonds, where we toured Birmingham, I think it was last week, with J.C. Cataldo, who did a great job on some of the mixed-use development over there that he's been involved in. So we want to go through this and spend more time with people, the guests that we've asked, but we're going to start with a master plan update. And before I turn it over to Ben, I want you to see this text amendments handout. We will not, our goal is to not go over this, but to give you an update of the issue that's been discussed, what the next step is, and what a time frame is. So take that with you, and if you have any questions, call somebody like Brent or Ben, or email me, but they'll know the answer, I won't. So have this, take that with you, and look at it, so we don't have to spend a lot of time, because we're trying to compress a lot in one night. So with that, Ben is going to talk about the master plan and where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Kishnick. I think I know everyone in the room, but just for introduction, my name is Ben Carlisle, the Carlisle Women Associates. We are the planning consultant for the city and also assist the planning department and on the everyday services. As I'm sure everyone in this room is aware of, the City Council, the Planning Commission, and staff have been working diligently over really the last couple of years to update the 2008 master plan. When we started this process, we really took a holistic look at the master plan, and through discussions with both staff and the Planning Commission, we realized that for the most part, the master plan is in really good, strong shape. There wasn't a major overhaul that needed to be done. Rather, what we wanted to focus on was specific tweaks in different chapters in specific areas that we want to look in more detail. So that's the focus of what this master plan updated is. As part of that, we did update the demographics. In 2008 master plan, the demographics were based on the 2000 census. Since that time, obviously, the new census has come out, so we've had to update the demographics as part of that. What was interesting in the demographic review, and really the discussion that we had at the public interaction portion of the master plan, was there was a significant focus on housing priorities and housing policy for the city. And specifically, there was a feeling that the Troy existing housing stock didn't really match up with the demographics, especially moving forward. And what I mean by that specifically is that there was a lack of housing options for those that didn't want to live in a traditional large single-family home. Troy has always been a single-family home housing stock. It's been a strong one. That's always a tenet of the master plan. But there was recognition that as we age and as we change as a population, that different housing options need to come into play too. So that's a focus of the master plan as well. Where you'll see the largest change to the master plan is really in this new chapter, so chapter 10. It's special area plans, and we're really focused on 4 different areas. Maple Road, North Troy, Rochester Road, and Big Beaver. In this sense, with the master plan, Big Beaver from a pedestrian standpoint, both getting across as well as getting along. And this really was short action plans that really targeted on specific recommendations that we can do in the near term to make changes in those areas. In addition, we did update all the outdated information in all the remaining chapters. But this was really the focus of the master plan. I'm proud to announce and say to the Planning Commission that the draft is complete. After tonight, the plan moving forward is that we'll present the final draft to the Planning Commission at the meeting in December. At that time, hopefully the Planning Commission will forward it on to City Council for their January meeting, at which time City Council will approve the plan for distribution and review. That's a statutory requirement in the Enabling Act. As part of that review, there's a mandatory 63-day period under which other jurisdictions, utilities, SEMCOG, et cetera, review the plan and give feedback back to the city. During that 63-day period, we will review the comments that are submitted, amend the plan as necessary, and bring it back to the Planning Commission in April for the public hearing, at which time the plan is to have City Council hopefully adopt the master plan in May. I'm going to hand over now to Mark, who's going to discuss more of the issues of development of Big Beaver.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening. So I'm going to give a very brief history of Big Beaver. So here's aerial photography from 1963. We show the corner of Big Beaver and Crooks. As you can see, it is slightly underdeveloped. 2-lane roads. Here's a picture from 2000. So what you see is the office corridor is created. It is built out. Some of the characteristics you see are large parking fields. What is interesting, note that this is a gas station right here in the northeast corner. So a little background. In 2006, the DDA commissioned the Big Beaver Corridor Study, and it developed a global view of where Big Beaver wanted to go to include pedestrian amenities, taller buildings that meet urban design standards, mixed-use developments. And then in 2008, the master plan was adopted by the Planning Commission, and the Big Beaver Corridor Study was brought into there, and the ideas of creating this new corridor was then emphasized. And then in 2011, the Downtown Development Authority commissioned design standards to help develop the form-based code, which was in the zoning ordinance adoption in 2011. So the zoning code allows for, in the Big Beaver district, many uses. It allows for vertical, mixed uses, and unlimited height and intensity. In our naivety at the time, we thought we were going to see an explosion of growth once the economy broke. And we haven't. But here is a list of projects that will show the progression of bringing buildings close. This is Starbucks, approved in 2006. This was before we even had a form-based code in, and because this was a condemnation consent agreement, we negotiated bringing the building closer and have a pedestrian zone and no drive-through. That was actually a big fight. This is the Gallery of Troy, the northwest corner of Big Beaver and I-75, approved in 2013. As you can see, this clearly has a pedestrian zone, a sidewalk, and it's right up on Big Beaver Road. But what you'll notice is it's only 1 story, and it's actually the pumped up 1 stories to make it look taller. And in Brent Salvador and Ben, when dealing with the developers, they ask, build more, and they won't. And that's what we're trying to find out why. And this was part of the project too, behind it to the north, the Hampton Inn. These are 4-story stick-built lumber. You know, at one time we had a 40-story project on the site, and we're wondering why not. But once again, you can see this is right up along the road. Totally changes character in the Big Beaver district. A shining example, this was approved in 2014, the Children's Hospital of Michigan, right across the street. Beautiful building, but if you know, this is Big Beaver right here. It's right up on the road. And another little quick lesson in form-based codes, you know, we have transparency requirements, which are glass so you can see in the building, so it activates the outside in. And then another important point, that there is a functioning entrance on the street. Contrary to popular belief, we don't require that to be the only entrance. There are some restaurants who elected to not put parking conveniently near their parking lots. We hear grumblings that we require that. We don't. We just require that there be one functioning on the Big Beaver side. So what we're getting is new development with our desired building placement, but it's single story. Single use, mostly restaurant, retail, or hotel, no mixed use, multiple stories only for the hotels and the DMC. What have we done up to this point? The Planning Commission and the City Council have met jointly previously. They're meeting tonight. And, well, Brian's been busting Brent Saab at the planning director, and Glenn Lane been the economic development specialist, to come up with a name for our tour, because we're going, and we call it a 3-minute in a truck tour. December 15th and 17th, we're going to the Columbus area and meeting with the City of Dublin staff and developers and economic development people to find out how they're getting intensity in development. We're going to spend a day and a half there and then shoot over to the west to the Indianapolis metro region and visit Fishers, Indiana, and Carmel, Indiana, and we've already have appointments with their staff. And so what we're going to do is, have tour findings and put together a presentation. We found how and why they're doing it, and at a future date, we'll present that to both bodies. And then we're going to target outside experts for the annual retreat, which this year the Planning Commission and DEA are invited to, and those dates are February 26th and 27th, and if I'm correct, it will be on the 26th at the Kresge Foundation. So we wanted to stop right here to see if there are any questions to this point.
Any questions from council or the Plan Commission to this point about the timeline, what we're looking for at this point?
I would just say that's a really good summary. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you, Brian.
I'll just go back, just to reiterate this. National Lampoons comes to my mind on number 3, but 3 minutes. So tonight, well, you all have met. I really think this is important because all the time we hear, well, what's your plan? What are you doing? We've been talking about the master plan for a while now. Okay, so now it's coming to a conclusion. But where's rubber hitting the road, and what are you actually touching here? Well, these two groups met. Now we've invited some guests. Then they're going to go on this tour, see what they find, present those, and then get outside experts because they know this area. Let's bring in some outside experts that they're working on to come to the retreat and have a conversation. And maybe that involves some of the locals. I know Matt was a big part of last year's retreat on Friday night. So I'm not going to do a lot of talking. I ask each one to introduce themselves and hit on some of these questions or not. Just what are their sensitivities? What are they seeing out there in Troy? What are they hearing from developers? The banking always comes up. Are they financing anything, or aren't they? Will they? Won't they? So these are the questions we gave them ahead of time, and then we'll open it up for the Planning Commission and Council to ask their questions. So usually I would start with ladies first, but I've already had this conversation, so I've been excused because I'm not so sure it makes sense to have the banker go first. The financier. Pardon me?
It does.
Does it? It's broken like a true developer. So let's ask Matt Farrell to just do some opening comments and touch on that. Thanks.
Happy to. Do you mind if I sit?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Humble and honored to be here, so thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Matt Farrell, CEO and founder of Core Partners. Been around the marketplace for about 16 years in the commercial sector. Prior to that, I was a proud Spartan, still a very proud Spartan. We are in the brokerage, property management, development, and project management business. We've got 112 employees sitting down in Bingham Farms on Telegraph, but most of my bread personally has been buttered within the Troy market for most of my professional career. Previous was a VP with David Friedman, and prior to that with Grubb & Ellis. So if you saw signs for Grubb, Friedman, and Core Partners in Troy, there was a heavy hand that I was probably somewhere amongst that mess trying to help figure things out. I go back to math, because business is math. So I decided to do a little scorecard real fast while we were talking. And I think most of us in the panel would agree that it comes down to occupancies and the motivated interest of the user base in the market. So I just wanted to share a few statistics real fast with you while we look at it. I compared Troy against Southeast Michigan at large, which includes Flint, Port Huron, Ann Arbor, to Detroit. Overall, Troy's sitting in a commercial sector at an 11.9% vacancy. The Southeast Michigan region's at 7.8. Detroit's at 11.5. When you break that down to the office market's at 25.1. We are above the region's average. Southeast Michigan's at 13.8, and Detroit's at 15.1. Here's a positive. There's only a couple positives here. The industrial market for Troy is at 1.9, 1.8. The Southeast Michigan industrial market's at 5.2, and Detroit industrial market's at 10.3. The tech market is at 10.8%, which is above the Southeast Michigan region of 9.6. And Detroit's at 19.2. It's a fairly small market of tech in Detroit. Retail is 2.8. That's another big positive. Big positive. People are coming here because they want to spend their dispendable income in the Troy marketplace. It's safe. You've got Somerset. You've got quality restaurants. There's a lot of spend in that equation. So 2.8% versus the region at 8.3 and Detroit at 8.6. The multifamily market is at 4.1% vacancy with 6,800 units, where Southeast Michigan's at 3.4. So we're slightly behind the curve on the average in the market there. Summarizing some of those numbers, I'll just make the following statement. The office market, which Troy has always been known to be very robust with, it's a safe, quality office community. It is a sleeper industrial community because most people don't realize how much industrial Troy really does have by public consumption. Industrial is doing well. Office is suffering. Office is suffering throughout the entire region, not just Troy. People are doing more with less from anywhere, at any time, from any location, and they don't have to be sitting at the desk to do it, to create a lot of paperwork and so on and so forth. That's a trend in the office sector. BOMA stated the average office occupant was in 250 square feet per person 6 years ago. That number is very quickly going down to 151 by next year. So you've lost 100 square feet per body, and you've also eliminated jobs out of those roles on average. So you've got a double hit. I look at the positives of Troy, and I think it's a timing issue, and that is Troy as a municipality did a nice job supporting the Monarch concept a number of years ago. You did a really nice job supporting the mixed-use pavilions concept that went 7-7 vote, and if the market hadn't crashed, would have been built by now. And we'd be talking about our successful mixed-use concept on Big Beaver in the Kmart site. Instead, we're here talking about a building that's 1 million square feet and undervaluing the rest of our real estate because it's still sitting there. So I don't look at the negatives, I look at the positives. Most of that is timing. You have a diminished use in office, and you have projects that haven't been mathematically substantiated, and the developer community, we'll talk about I'm sure here, is willing to take risk if the market shows demand for that opportunity. But that's a partnership between everybody at the table. And it's the bankers, the city officials, and the entrepreneurs coming together to take that risk. It's a teamwork. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Ryan, you want to continue on?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I'm Ryan Marsh, president of Marsh Construction. We are a construction and development management company, and we've been around serving Southeast Michigan for about 60 years now. Most recently, we did the Kilmer Plaza project on Big Beaver, which is between, on the north side of the road between Rochester and Livernois. That is the mixed-use project that has retail up front, and then we built the, 17 condo units behind the project, which I think worked out really well, but it's a very small area, and it's kind of if you put a microscope on what Troy wants to be, you kind of look at that as a good example. Matt talked about the Monarch, and he talked about office vacancies increasing. So if you have the offices going away, you need more residential population. A product like the Monarch would be great. I think that as developers of retail, owners of office, that we need to see some of the nighttime population increase in Troy. I'd like to see that along Big Beaver. Because it's demand-based, a lot of our retail is based on who's available to us in the market. Fortunately for Troy and unfortunately for Big Beaver, so both ways, you have Somerset. Now, my center has to compete with one of the best malls in the country. The city has one of the best malls in the country, but they also have a lot of the retailers that I want, or Harvey wants, along the corridor, and it's what you want to see. Unfortunately, we're left with a lot of food because that serves the daytime population. They're the ones that sign our leases and the ones that get us bank financing. So as you kind of move forward, if you have the houses, now how do you deal with your traffic patterns? I'd like to see small chunks of Big Beaver slowed down. I'd like to see parking. I haven't read your master plan, maybe this is in there, but I'd like to see chunks slowed down. You might have test spots where you can build some buildings closer, be able to walk, park in the street, get out, just like an old Woodward. You know, you have a Big Beaver and maybe a new Big Beaver, something like that. That, I think, would get you what you're seeking, which is that restaurant, retail, with a little bit of office and residential above. But I think it's going to take a great infrastructure effort to get that. And that's a lot of capital that you all would have to look at closely. So those are my thoughts.
I'm Amanda Uffelman, and I am with Comerica Bank. I've been there 26 years in commercial real estate, construction lending, and then I was at Michigan National 7 years before that. It appears I could be Matt's mother because before that I was also a proud Spartan. I'm sure he was 10. The money will follow Marsh and Harvey. We should be the third person discussed. I know if we don't come to the table, you don't get it off the ground, but we follow the good developers that come to us, and they haven't come to us for projects in Troy for the most part. I completely agree that the nightlife sort of has to be there, and that the restaurants that attract those crowds right now are in the body of the malls, and that the local restaurants that are even coming online are more family-based and earlier. For construction lenders, mixed-use development is difficult because you underwrite office tenants and retail and multifamily completely differently. From a return standpoint, from how they're built, you don't see a lot of successful mixed-use vertical, primarily because the same thing. You have different fire suppression, you have different, when you put people over restaurants, you have to do with noise and smell, and it's just more complicated. And so you have to underwrite not only the retail rents per foot, which unfortunately are always, not always, but frequently overestimated. And you have to underwrite the people that are going to live in the multifamily. We see a lot of multifamily, single multifamily requests, and we're doing a lot of it in Southeast Michigan right now. I think we like the horizontal approach to mixed use, like you're doing, sort of
It's easier to
in
finance.
the round. It's
Yeah.
much easier to finance,
You can
even if
segment
it's
it.
for sale housing. You can just spin off the condos where your retail stays there. Though we have done both, I think the horizontal approach is preferred. I think that while coming out of the recession in 2011 is the start of it, we're still coming out of it from a banking standpoint. And the number of developers, there aren't as many as there were before. So the capital has to be there. It does need public support, I mean, to the extent that it's there. Detroit has a 2% multifamily vacancy right now. 0%, and that 2% you probably don't want to live in. I mean, it's that tight right now, so there's a lot of multifamily in Detroit, and everybody wants to do it. But I do think that there are enough local banks to finance good projects with good sponsorship, with good underwriting, and the appropriate amounts of equity and recourse and everything you'd want. I think, you know, that we're all looking at the same thing. And I think the money will follow a good project. Even more so, you know, 2016, 2017, as the market strengthens.
Good evening, my name is Harvey Weiss, I'm with Weiss Properties. We're a metropolitan Detroit development firm, primarily the Tri-Counties. We get out to Genesee and Livingston County. We've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work in Troy. It's been a number of years. The developments that we've done here are the 2 shopping centers on Crooks Road, just north of Big Beaver. I refer to them as the Potbelly Shopping Center and the Chipotle Shopping Center adjacent to one another. A number of years prior to that, we did the office building where in the Bahama Breeze development up on Big Beaver Road. As a matter of fact, I think Comerica funded that project for us. I commend the Planning Commission and the City Council for having the foresight to work towards the future over. I think it's very important that you're going through this exercise for the forthcoming years. And I'm here tonight, I think, primarily to discuss the retail component of things. That's true. I know I sat on the DDA for a number of years back when the 2006 plan was worked on. Can't believe it's been that long since I've sat on the DDA. And I know what the desire of the community is and was. And I think it's achievable to see more density. In the last number of years, candidly, most of our development was one-story development, not just the city of Detroit, everywhere, primarily because the tenants who were seeking to lease space and willing to pay the rents required for new construction were the food service type tenants. I think the big thing for Troy to be concerned with the mixed use, I should also mention, our firm is in the process of completing the mixed use development in Birmingham that you see under construction, the large white building on Woodward Avenue just south of Maple Road. That's a mixed use development. The first floor of that development is going to be retail. The second, third, and fourth floors are office, and there's a luxury condominium / apartment unit on the 5th floor. So it's a 5-unit mixed-use development, and also has underground parking for some of the tenants. But I think City of Troy's got a wonderful office space. I think you've got the infrastructure there, or even the office density that nobody else in the state of Michigan's got. I think the Big Beaver corridor is a wonderful corridor, and you've got the best mall in the state of Michigan, there's no question about it. But I think the big challenge, and I hate to be the one to bring up negatives, is as developers try to seek tenants, there's a lot of existing space. Matt mentioned there's 25% vacancy in office space. It's going to be very hard for a developer to compete with the cost of new construction and offer rents to prospective tenants and compete with the existing space that's on the market at probably half that price. So I don't know, some food for thought, if there's any incentives that the city could think about as a developer wants to do a mixed use. If you want to do mixed use, it's my opinion that you'll have to incentivize things. Brownfield, DDA, TIFs, I don't know what mechanisms are in place, but with the high cost of construction and what I'm told the rents are in the city of Troy, the two will not come together. I think mixed use is a viable development concept for the corridor, as Ryan suggested. You've got Big Beaver, maybe something around Big Beaver or near Big Beaver. I've been told by many of the occupants looking to be in mixed use developments that they want to be in walkable communities. Many prospective tenants that we've talked to for that Birmingham development have committed to it because they want to be in a walkable community. They want to be in an urban environment. If you're just going to try to get the typical tenant who has a lot of occupants or employees that wants less expensive space and the urban walkable community part's not important to them, you know, Birmingham will never get that type of a tenant. But I believe with proper incentives, proper planning, it's very achievable to do some type of urban development or an area within the community. And for whatever it's worth, I think maybe starting as close to the mall as possible is the right place for it to begin. I'm here to answer any questions if I can, urban development or anything that we've done.
Mayor, I think that's a great introduction, and I think there's, from those 4 conversations, I think there's a lot of spin-offs, so we'll turn it back over to you and Planning Commission.
Thank you, Brian. Once again, thank you for coming tonight. Very insightful for me so far. And I'm sure there are some questions. And maybe I'll just start off, because there has been some discussion about trying to bring density into the corridor by having restrictive ordinance that says you can only, you have to build a certain height. What's your feelings on making it so restrictive to try and entice that in? Do you think that works kind of against you or for you?
Against.
More against?
Yeah, I think there has to be a good balance between that. You want to control your materials and your development, and how you situate it on your, as you look at Big Beaver, but I think if the more restrictive it gets, the more expensive or difficult it becomes for guys like Harvey and I to work with our users that are coming to us. So I think you also have some very, very good consultants when it comes to planning, and they can handle a lot of that more administratively without it necessarily being text. But if you give them some good guidance, they can really turn over a good product with the developer.
On the same hand, when you allow a developer to pretty much do whatever he wants on a site, like right next to I-75 in Big Beaver, to put a 4-story hotel instead of trying to encourage more density, you lose the ability to attract what you're really looking to attract on a certain, and are you saying that we should leave it open but try to bring incentives? That's the way to entice the density to a location like that, so to speak?
My initial reaction was similar to Ryan's. It's a negative. You don't want to put an obstacle in front of the opportunity because you're competing with multiple markets in Southeast Michigan for those same type uses. But density is drawn because of demand. So if there's demand for it, the developers always want higher density. If the demand is there, they will build vertical because the demand justifies it, it lowers their cost of dirt, and raises the return on the project. So they're going to create density if the demand is there. The real question is, kind of going back, and this is Troy's inherent issue for a long time, is we are a daytime community in most cases. And we're not an 18-hour, there's a term in the modern design, modern planning called an 18-hour community. We're definitely not an 18-hour community in Troy. How do we find a way to compete with Royal Oak, compete with Rochester downtown, compete with downtown Detroit? Who's the lucky billionaire that can write a few checks and buy 70 buildings for us? But we need a visionary and some support to do that, because you have a lot of the key ingredients. You have safety, you have schools, you have a fiscally sound municipality. Some of the other communities can't say that. So you have the founding blocks. We just have to build off those founding blocks and give the market what they're looking for. And walkable is a key factor. That's why Pavilions, I think, was such an attractive project for everybody. There's a few absolutes. That is, Big Beaver is not a walkable street. It's just, it's an absolute. And how, we have to create something different than that.
Councilman Campbell.
We're just out of curiosity, I mean, Birmingham's a stone's throw away from us. Are they getting all this construction basically because it's a walkable community? And the building, I know the building you're building there. I mean, why wouldn't that, or why couldn't that be built on Big Beaver near the mall?
Well, I think they're getting the new buildings because there's demand for space. Their occupancy level is probably 95 or 96% in the office market. So the demand is there for tenants who require more space, which drives the new development. But I think a large part of it, yes, is the urban concept. I think a lot of tenants today, especially like advertising tenants, financial tenants, they're saying they want to be in a urban type of community. They don't want the large parking lot where everybody goes home. And the reason for that, I'm told, is because employees today, they can attract better quality of help who want to live in an urban environment. people will leave, go have dinner, then come back to work for another few hours. So I think that's the main thing. It's the supply and demand. There is no supply and there is demand for space.
And the rents are justifying the construction development costs. Office rents are peaking out at mid-40s, mid-30s to mid-40s, which are big numbers for office.
And you have a lot of, back to the residential, you have a lot of residential density in Birmingham where there's a lot of people, rooftops, very close to the retail. So you've got that living, working 18-hour community, and Troy's got that shorter day. So I think that's why Birmingham attracts a lot of trendy office tenants.
Thanks. Welcome.
Carlton?
Ryan, you had mentioned slowing down Big Beaver as a potential way to attract the type of development we're looking for. Have you seen that type of project
I have not.
on a corridor like that?
I have personally not. My thought is you have a large boulevard, so you've got a ton of land that's not being used. So the thought is maybe you bring the faster moving cars towards the boulevard, towards the middle. You've got slower moving cars and maybe some parallel parking or more street parking and walking on the outside.
And creating the environment that may attract
Exactly.
the type of
Now,
development.
you've got a lot of different property owners. This is way easier said than done. You've got a lot of things to coordinate. But if you, like I think Harvey said, the closer you start that to Somerset, the better. And try to capture an area where there's maybe less owners that you might be able to work with in a constructive way.
Okay, thanks.
The Big Beaver study had essentially what you're talking about, where the faster traffic was in the center, but then there were side lanes to each side where you could park and that type of thing, you know, for sidewalk eating and all that kind of stuff. Would that still work? Because that is a part of our master plan, the Big Beaver corridor study.
Is what I'm saying consistent with what's in the master plan?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, I think so, yeah. And you just can't take on too big of a chunk at once.
The other, if I could just one quick follow-up, in our walk last week in the Birmingham Rail District, the developer there said perhaps if you created a separate district near Big Beaver, but had, you know, the whole amenities of the mixed use lofts and everything like that, that might be more receptive to developers. Do you folks believe that or not?
Personally, I don't know. I don't like forced communities, so I'd like to see it really come about organically, and of course, there's gonna be some public investment in that, but
But if you did that district with an incentive, then it could make a
it very
difference.
well, it may change, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I could maybe touch on that a little bit from the developer's perspective. I think it's that other developer, I agree with him. If a area could be put together for an urban type of development, right in that small Big Beaver corridor, but you said it right. The incentive's the important thing, because if it costs, and Ryan's the expert in cost, I'm not, but if it's gonna cost X amount of dollars to build, and the rents you're gonna achieve in this market are so far below the justification, you'll never get funding for a development, nor would a developer wanna do that. But I think you gotta be practical and realistic. It would be great to slow down traffic, it would be great to create some parking along Big Beaver, but will MDOT go along with that? Will the property owners go along with that? That could be a 10, 20, 30-year process. But I think which is a wonderful thing, and I think you gotta have the foresight and, to look forward. But in the immediate future, if that's the city's intent, I think you've gotta be practical and realistic and put something together that actually works.
There's an 800-pound gorilla in that comment right there in regards to Forbes with the Kmart site. So you have a couple of issues going on. You've got 1 million square feet of office product that still affects negatively every appraisal, all occupancy numbers, the numbers I shared because of that building being still erected. most experts in business will tell you will never be reoccupied in its current life because it's functionally obsolete. Scrap values raise at some point in the hopefully near future. Maybe they're justified to actually leveling it and getting rid of it. But is there a negotiation between municipality and a large property owner that benefits both parties? Can you convince MDOT to give back land value stretching from Somerset to Somerset Corners, slowing everything down in front of Somerset, creating land that they actually can monetize, because that becomes valuable frontage land, in trade for get rid of that big behemoth, because we'd like to see it go. And if you can get that party to convince, other landowners will gobble on. They'll start seeing that opportunity. Just an idea.
Yeah.
So following up on that, Matt, is a pavilion-type project viable today or not? Could it happen, or is it just not economically feasible right now?
Based on the numbers I'm hearing Cheesecake just wrote a check for, yes, it is. If somebody was willing to write the check to take the first developer risk to build spec multifamily, look at the sale price of the Somerset apartments. That's a state record per unit pricing. It's huge. There is the occupancy numbers in this town on multifamily, and there's the draw for retail and restaurant draw to this town. I would think that if that plan came back to the table today, the market would be willing to justify it.
So following up on that, if I may, so how do we find that developer someplace in our country or some other country to say, you know, what do we do to promote that chunk of land?
The bigger question is whether or not Forbes is willing to part with it.
Oh, that's true. That's the other.
He's probably capable. You just have to convince him to do it.
Yeah, I agree with
But
that.
they might be the one. They might be the one.
Yeah, I think that discussion would take another hour. There's no
Great
question,
comment.
there's no question that the Forbes family bought that to protect Somerset Collection.
Correct.
Okay, so you have to understand that as much as we'd like to partner with the Forbes family to try and do something, they do not want to do something at that corner that's going to be, reflect on the collection. So you got to keep that in mind. Other questions? How about 5 more minutes to question the panel, and then we're going to have to wrap it up tonight. Councilman Henderson.
Just a point of clarification. When Ben threw up his first slide, I think it said something to the effect of, with regard to the master plan, that we're going to discuss walkability in the revisions of the master plan along Big Beaver. Right. But I just want to make sure that walkability is not what people think in terms of walkability, but it's going to include mixed use properties. Is that correct?
That's a portion of the concept for walkability.
How does the panel feel about a trolley or some other form of transportation up and down Big Beaver to maybe not make it walkable, but make it so that you could get from one area to the other much easier than having to come down your office, get in your car, spend 45 minutes to drive across the street to go to a restaurant on Big Beaver? What if the city provided trolley service as an alternative to what you're talking about, where slowing things down, but maybe slowing it down in a different way?
I have 3 millennials living in the city of Detroit and commuting to the suburbs to go to work. And that trend's going to continue because we're keeping our youth here for the first time in 15 years. So there's more staying here and wanting to be employed here than they are flying, taking off to Chicago and Atlanta and New York. So that's a great gift that the brain drain has slowed down and we're keeping them. But a lot of them are navigating without vehicles. They're working in the city and playing in the city and not dealing with the car payments and insurance. So to the extent we get on that bandwagon and can do it cost effectively, it can't hurt. It's going to bring that youth back to the market. If we can do it efficiently.
Yeah, just to the Amanda, but, so Birmingham has no trouble financing these multi-story, even residential. I think there's the senior housing.
Right.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Senior housing is, again, a different animal, too. I mean, obviously, an aging population, with the senior housing is critical to the party doing it. you are really gonna stick with the people that know how to do it, because it is different. But there's such a giant need for it that they're, they're easy to finance for the players that's what they do.
So if we were to find someone willing to do something like that near Big Beaver or Big Somerset, that might be more
Yes,
easily
you
financed.
have interested banks in the continuum of care senior housing projects.
Thank you.
One thing that goes along with that comment is, when it comes to financing it, let's say you have a mixed-use building and you're fine, you've got your retail pre-leased and you've got your major office tenant in it, but, maybe 50% of your office is still available. That's where, like Harvey pointed to, we need the incentives to buy us time where, the public will guarantee some of those spaces for lease that allows Amanda to finance, it gets them up, and maybe that kind of activity spawns some more lease up.
Supposing we were to just forego the office, because we certainly have enough office anyway in Troy. Supposing you just concentrated on senior housing.
I think it's all demand-based when it comes to that. I don't think you can sit here in Nick's office just because we have a lot. I think you need to revisit what kind of office you have in Troy.
Senior housing is its own.
Yeah, you have to really.
It's its own property. They provide the shuttles to take you to where they want to go.
But if the municipality created a TIF or an incentive for tenant TIs to recapitalize the interior spaces of the buildings to give what the marketplace is looking for, that's a huge benefit.
In existing office.
In existing office, because you have a lot of 20 and 30-year-old product in the market that hasn't seen facelift. And why you're seeing the resurgence of Detroit, Royal Oak, other markets where they have the demand is they're creating the product that the users want. Floor to height, floor to ceiling glass, hard floors, hard surface ceilings, exposed duct, that kind of thing that is really attractive to the user groups. And Troy's got a very limited supply of that. So when the 20,000 square foot officers is doing a tour of the market, they may find a good deal in Big Beaver and a good address in Big Beaver and a safe community, but they find the space that they want somewhere else. So maybe an incentive TIF for tenant improvements might be attractive.
Mayor Pro Tem Pennington.
Do you see any projects in the areas that you guys have expertise of, the mixed use where it's just the retail and the residential? Not so much the one in Woodward, just the top floor, but it's,
In Detroit.
In Detroit.
well,
Midtown
that's like a
Detroit,
facelift,
but
though, isn't it?
not, I don't see anything.
Or is it new construction also? Is it like a facelift building like?
No, Detroit's new construction,
Yeah, oh, okay.
mixed use new construction.
I can't think of any suburbs
I
today
can't
where that
either.
type of development's ongoing, though.
I can't either.
We certainly don't have anything like that.
Northville has,
We do have some retail,
There's
but I think
some-
there's office components to it as well, isn't there? I think
right,
so.
I was thinking of the
One
Main
thing-
Street project, I think that's multi and retail.
I think it's safe to say that whether it's office, I don't know a lot about multifamily or retail. Banks like Comerica will be glad to loan money to quality developers for those developments if you've got signed leases and occupants that are willing to take that space. So if there is demand for space, then the banks will loan money if there's credible tenants who are committing to space and developers that are able to construct and turn projects over. I see no problem in today's world in getting finance for projects that have a level of occupancy before you start construction.
But you're right, not on a completely speculative basis.
I can't imagine that happening.
Well, when we did tour the rail area over there, part of that was live and work, where work on the bottom, live on the top, and it was a flop. It was a complete flop. And if you can't do it in Birmingham, in the rail district, I don't think you could do it probably anywhere. So that was kind of a work on the bottom, live on the takeaway from that, it's probably not a way to, probably not a way to go. And when we went to the rail there, I thought CJ said that try to get more than one developer to work in an area, as opposed to letting one particular developer come in for his particular project. And it kind of isolates the area just for that developer. Try to get more than one, maybe two or three, like going on in the rail area over there to do that. Is that something that a developer would be okay with, encourage to work with other developers in a project? If we isolated an area,
I think from the developer's perspective, they want as much as they can do, but I think from the city's perspective, it's good to have multiple developers working on segments of a development. I think that'd be prudent on the city's behalf, that's my opinion.
okay, I think we'll have to wrap this up. We certainly appreciate the panel coming in. It was very insightful for me.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having
Thank you.
us.
And I'm going to turn the meeting back over to City Manager Kishnick. We're going to try to wrap this up,
Yeah.
because I know the city management's looking for some direction.
Yeah, what I think, Mayor, is our direction, if I can find it, which I've not been very good at so far. This way, where we're going is the 3 Men in a Truck tour will take place here, and then this date is to be determined, to present them their findings to both groups, and then target the February retreat to have this a longer discussion, a more detailed discussion. For example, I heard incentives several times. The only one who didn't say incentives was the banker. But I heard these guys say, and I'm, doing local government for a long time in TIF districts and, different kinds of incentives. What are the incentives? I'd like to really hone down on what incentives are we really talking about, right? And what, not necessarily what pushes that over the edge, but what's significant. Planting trees, is that an incentive? Probably not, right? It's a nice thing, but let's really talk about it. So that's where it's going, Mayor. So that's our presentation today.
Once again, thanks. Thank you for coming. During our study sessions, we have to open it up to public comment, so I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak. If you would come forward, sir, and speak into the microphone and give us your name, and please limit it to a couple minutes, please.
Okay. My name is Art Morass. I've been a city member here for 40 years and Troy Township member for 56 or whatever. I don't even go any further than that. I've had several ideas several times, and a lot of it is consistent to what the research shows. And there's a lot of times I keep on hearing, what are we going to do? Where are we going to get this vision? What are we going to... It's here. It's here. We just have to, visualize it and see it. You mentioned about what do we do, plant trees? No, let's not cut down the trees we already have. Let's not cut down the 150-foot trees that show life, a history of this city. Cutting down a 100-foot tree and planting 2 5-foot trees doesn't show, it looks like you just got here, This city has a history, and I remember it in the glory days of when this was called, and it was like the world headquarters city. Volkswagen of America world headquarters, Kmart world headquarters, Penske world headquarters, a couple of 3 other world headquarters. I knew a couple of gas stations that the guys put up. Joe's gas station world headquarters, And in order to attract world headquarter type businesses and places, we have to have unobstructed, the word I'm seeing is contradictory. I've heard of this in many circles many times, and then we finally got off of the contradictory city. Like, it used to be a long time ago, we were the count town on the other side of the tracks. That's what the Birmingham people called it. Then we got the high rises. Then we got world-class people here. We got world-class offices here. Then we ran into a section of fragmenting. And when the man came in for the 2020 discussion, he says one of the first and most obvious things is you got your residential going right up to Big Beaver. I mean, you know, there's a point of ridiculousness. We've got the whole city for residential, and all residential is important. And
30 seconds.
you gotta have a place for walking, destinations. It's gotta have a place for something beautiful so other developers will come by. We got a building at the corner of Town Center Drive and Livernois, and it's less than attractive. And it's in the wrong place, and I'm sure it's too late to do anything about it now. Not really.
Okay. We're going to give you an opportunity at the city council meeting if you want to come back and speak some more. There's a section there, but we're going to have to wrap this up.
Okay, this will be one last paragraph. I don't know how many times, and back and forth, they said, we don't have the property, we don't have the place to put this stuff. How are we going to do it? We have it all over the place. You just got to open up our eyes and not fragment anymore. We got 40 acres across the street over there. It can be well developed, and I have an idea, and a concept which I'll bring in, about a lake there. And that lake becomes...
I'm sorry, we're done.
Okay, that lake becomes an attraction and a destination.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak this evening? Seeing none, once again, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's very insightful for us. We're adjourned. Thank you.